The rain hit the window like it knew something I didn't, and I stood frozen in the hallway with a joke halfway out of my mouth, watching a girl I had known for years turn a shade of red I had never seen on her before. That single moment, one careless sentence, one nervous laugh, was about to unravel 3 years of silence I didn't even know I'd been carrying. If you believe people deserve second chances, if you believe kindness can quietly rewrite a life, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope tonight, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Daniel, and for most of my 26 years, I had been the reliable one, the older brother who fixed things, who showed up early, who never made waves. My younger sister Mira was the opposite. Loud, spontaneous, always dragging friends home for movie nights that turned into sleepovers, that turned into breakfast the next morning with strangers eating my cereal. One of those strangers over time stopped being a stranger. Her name was Elena. Elena had been Mira's best friend since college, and by extension, she had become a fixture in our house the way old furniture becomes part of a room. You stop noticing it's even there, until one day you do, and you realize it was holding the whole place together. She was quiet in a way that made people underestimate her. The kind of quiet that came from thinking carefully before speaking, not from having nothing to say. She worked long shifts at a small design studio downtown, sketching layouts for other people's dreams while quietly nursing her own. A small bookstore cafe, she talked about the way other people talk about lovers, with a softness that made you jealous of a building. For 3 years, Elena was simply Mira's friend to me. We talked, sure. We argued about which pizza place was better. We sat on the porch some nights when neither of us could sleep, saying nothing important, just filling the dark with company. But I never let myself look too closely at why those nights felt different from every other night in my life. I had built walls so quietly I hadn't even noticed I was living inside them. The walls existed because 4 years earlier, I had loved someone else, a woman named Priya, who left without much explanation beyond a note that said she needed to find herself, as if I had been the thing lost in the first place. After that, I stopped trying. Not dramatically, not with tears or declarations, but slowly, the way a plant stops reaching for light it no longer believes will come. I told myself I was fine. I told everyone I was fine. Only my mother, in her worried glances across the dinner table, seemed to suspect otherwise. Then came the night everything shifted. It was late October, the kind of evening where the wind carries the smell of rain before the rain even arrives. Mira was out of town for a work conference, and Elena had come by to drop off a jacket Mira had left at her apartment. We ended up talking in the kitchen the way we always did, except this time the conversation lingered longer than usual. She told me about a client who wanted her to redesign an entire brand identity in 2 days. I told her about a leaking faucet I still hadn't fixed. Somewhere between the small talk and the second cup of coffee, the storm outside grew heavier, thunder rattling the windows, rain slashing sideways against the glass. "You should probably wait it out," I said, glancing at the darkening sky. "It's getting bad out there." She laughed, said she'd be fine, that it was just a short drive, but the sky disagreed with her, lighting up in a flash that made her flinch. And in that half-second of instinct, without thinking, without calculating the weight of the words, I said it, half as a joke, half as something else I hadn't given myself permission to feel. "Can I stay tonight?" "I mean, you could stay tonight? Here, it's pouring." I meant it as an easy out, a practical suggestion wrapped in humor so that if she said no, it would cost me nothing. That was the kind of armor I had built for myself. Say things halfway so rejection never fully lands. But instead of the light laugh I expected, instead of her usual easy deflection, Elena went quiet. Her cheeks flushed a color I hadn't seen before, and her eyes, usually so composed, flickered somewhere between surprise and something more fragile. "Why are you asking me that like it's a joke?" she said softly, not quite meeting my eyes. "When I've been waiting 3 years for you to ask me anything at all?" The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, the storm outside suddenly quieter, as if the whole world had paused to let that sentence land. I didn't know what to say. 3 years. The number sat heavy in my chest, because 3 years was exactly how long she had been in my life. Exactly how long I had mistaken comfort for nothing more than friendship. Exactly how long I had been too guarded to notice what was standing right in front of me. I want to pause here and ask you, have you ever realized, in one single sentence, that you had been blind to something for years. If this story is already stirring something in you, imagine what's coming. Stay with me. That night, we didn't sleep much. Not because anything scandalous happened, but because once that wall cracked, everything behind it came rushing out. She told me about the nights she sat on our porch, hoping I would say something, anything, that would tell her she wasn't imagining the quiet current between us. She told me about the birthday I forgot to notice she'd dyed her hair for, about the time she almost took a job 3 states away just to stop feeling something for a man who seemed incapable of feeling anything back. She wasn't angry when she said these things. That was the part that broke me. She said them gently, like confessions she'd rehearsed in the mirror 100 times, finally allowed to breathe. I told her about Priya, about the note, about how I had decided, somewhere in the wreckage of that relationship, that it was safer to let people orbit around me than to let anyone close enough to leave a mark. I told her I hadn't meant to shut her out specifically. I had shut everyone out, and she had simply been standing close enough to feel the cold of it. We talked until the storm passed, and the first gray light of morning slipped through the curtains. Nothing physical happened that night. No dramatic kiss in the rain. No movie-perfect moment. What happened was quieter and, in its own way, far more significant. 2 people who had spent years circling each other finally stopped pretending the circling wasn't a kind of longing. But here's the thing about walls built over years. They don't fall in a single night, no matter how honest the conversation. The next morning, in the sober light of day, I panicked. I told her I needed time to think, that it was a lot to process, that I didn't want to ruin what we had by rushing into something neither of us was ready for. I watched her face carefully as I said it, watched the hope that had bloomed overnight begin to fold back into itself, and I hated myself a little for being the reason. She nodded, said she understood, and left before Mira even got back from her trip. For the next 2 weeks, things between us grew strange in the way things do when 2 people are trying too hard to act normal. She stopped coming over as often. When she did, our conversations were careful, edited, stripped of the ease that used to define them. Mira noticed, of course. Mira noticed everything. And one evening she cornered me in the garage while I was pretending to organize tools I hadn't touched in months. "What did you do to Elena?" she asked, arms crossed, in the tone she used to use when we were kids and I'd broken something of hers. I told her the truth, or most of it. That something had shifted between us, that I had panicked, that I didn't know how to move forward without risking everything. The friendship, the family closeness, the fragile trust I had spent years rebuilding after Priya. Mira listened without interrupting, which for her was itself a kind of miracle. And when I finished, she said something I haven't forgotten since. "You keep talking about protecting yourself from getting hurt again," she said. "But you don't realize you're hurting her right now, in real time, by refusing to choose. Silence is a decision too, Daniel. You're just choosing the version where nobody has to be brave." Her words sat with me for days. I turned them over while driving, while lying awake, while standing at that same kitchen counter where the whole thing had started. I began to understand that my fear wasn't really about Elena at all. It was about the story I had written for myself, one where love was a debt eventually collected with interest, where opening up always ended in someone walking away. But Elena had never given me a single reason to believe she was Priya. I had simply been too afraid to separate the two. 3 weeks after that stormy night, I showed up at Elena's apartment unannounced, holding nothing but the courage I had spent weeks scraping together. She opened the door with a guarded expression, the kind people wear when they've decided to protect themselves from further disappointment. I didn't give her a joke this time. I didn't hide behind humor or half sentences. I told her plainly that I had spent 3 years not seeing her because I was terrified of seeing anyone, that the night of the storm hadn't been a mistake but the first honest thing I'd said in years, and that the 2 weeks of silence afterward had been me being a coward, not me changing my mind. I told her that I didn't want an easy out this time. I wanted to know if there was still a door open, even slightly, even after everything. She was quiet for a long moment. The same quiet from the kitchen weeks before, except this time her eyes weren't full of surprise. They were full of something closer to relief, like she had been holding her breath since the night of the storm and had only now allowed herself to exhale. She told me that she had almost convinced herself that the whole thing had been a mistake, that maybe she had imagined the years of unspoken connection into something bigger than it was. But she said the fact that I came back, that I chose to be brave instead of comfortable, told her everything she needed to know. I won't pretend the months after that were easy. Relationships built on years of unspoken feelings don't magically become simple just because the truth finally comes out. We had to learn how to talk to each other in a new language, one where feelings weren't hidden behind jokes or deflected with humor. There were nights of doubt, moments where old fears crept back in, arguments born not out of dislike but out of two people learning how to trust something they had both quietly wanted for so long. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of Mira's words in that garage, that choosing silence was still a choice, and I had already spent enough years choosing the coward's version of safety. Slowly, the walls I had built after Priya didn't so much crumble as they were rebuilt into windows. Elena had a way of making vulnerability feel less like exposure and more like relief, like setting down a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. She never rushed me, never demanded I heal on her timeline, but she also never let me retreat fully into old habits. When I caught myself deflecting with jokes during hard conversations, she would simply look at me, not with judgment, but with a patience that said she'd wait as long as it took for the real answer underneath the joke. A year later, almost to the day of that storm, I stood in the same kitchen where it all began, watching rain streak down the same window, and I asked her a different question, one with no joke hidden inside it, no escape route built into the wording. I asked her to marry me. This time, there was no hesitation, no flush of shocked silence. There was only her voice, steady and sure, saying yes before I had even finished the sentence, as if she had been waiting not just since that stormy night, but since the very first year she walked into our house as simply Mira's friend. Looking back now, I understand that the joke I made that rainy October night wasn't really a joke at all. It was the first crack in years of self-protection, the first moment I let something true slip out before I had time to armor it. Sometimes the most life-changing moments don't announce themselves with fireworks or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they arrive disguised as a careless sentence, a nervous laugh, a blush you weren't prepared to see. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to follow that crack instead of patching it over, it leads you exactly where you were always meant to be. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a moment you almost let slip away, or a person you're still too afraid to be honest with, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's not too late to be brave. Let this story remind you that second chances are real, that walls built out of fear can still become windows, and that sometimes the people who have been standing quietly beside us all along are exactly the ones we've been searching for. And before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something. Down in the comments, tell me this. Has there ever been a moment in your life where one small, unplanned sentence changed everything that came after? I read every single comment, and I would love to hear your story, because sometimes the bravest thing we ever do is finally say out loud the thing we've been too afraid to admit even to ourselves. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it moved you even a little, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one, stories about second chances, quiet courage, and the small moments that end up changing everything. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't be afraid to knock down the walls you built to survive a pain that no longer needs protecting against.